In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! Oh boy, we are back, and this is going to be fun for me. Hopefully it's fun for you, because a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that Playmates Toys had reacquired the Star Trek license and were going to start producing more action figures, which all of us who are obsessed with their 90s line of action figures, this whole show is about it, we're excited for them to resume and really hope that we hope Mr. Playmates, Ms. Playmates, whoever, please make these 4.5-inch scale and in the style of your original series, because we love them so much. But guess what? You did a line almost 300 figures long, but we had a lot of requests. We have a ton of options that we would like you to make.
I'll say, Keith initially pitched this to me. He's like, I'm going to make a top 10 of the figures I'd like
top
to see.
10.
What he sent to me was a top 40, and really probably 100 in that, because some of those were entire play sets of entire casts of entire things. So I thought to myself, oh, people are going to write in and just lambast Keith because he put in too many figures. But the truth of the matter is the majority of people said, Keith, you forgot some of the best things. Or, I can't believe you didn't say this. I can't believe you didn't say this. How could you possibly not say that? And so, Keith, I demanded that you have a reckoning. And, well, here we are.
Look, this is the accountability, folks. And because guess what? You were right. I left off a ton of amazing figures that I desperately wish Playmates will make. So, guess what? We're starting a four-part we are starting a 4-part series filling in the holes that I missed from the holes that Playmates missed. So here we are with a top 40 Playmates figures that I missed. And spoiler alert, there's probably going to be more past that. But before I start with figure number 40 again, I want to credit some of the people who suggested these figures, and there are more of them out there. There are more coming in along the way, so I will try to be crediting them when we do Series 3 of this. But a lot of these suggestions came from Eric Anderson, Thomas Knippen, The Trek Reviewer, Ken Marsh, Mark Lavender, Chris Gren, Phoenix Cage, Daniel Baumforth, Sean Robertson, Jonathan Parks, and Mark Mountain. So thank you very much for your suggestions. Keep them coming, because as long as we keep coming up with more, we'll keep doing more of these, because they might be torture for Mike, but I really do enjoy them.
I think it's interesting. In fact, and based on some of the comments, I think we are all under the understanding that the majority of these are not going to get made. This is a fantasy fulfillment segment, as we know they're going to probably start with not too many fantasy suggestions, if you catch me. Let's keep what's the little, you know what? I'm not even going to try to remember that little figure, that little like voodoo doll.
The Horgon.
Oh, the Horgon. Yeah. None of those. Yes. Keep that out of here.
All right. Oh, well, you know what? You think it's fantasy. Playmates? I'm looking at you.
Wasn't there one that was like the Harlem Globetrotters in one episode? They've been like, well, that's not happening.
That was Scooby-Doo. All right.
Oh, yeah, okay, you're right.
What is going on over there? You know what? You're here to see the top 40, or I guess the back half of the top 80. So let's just get into it. And let's go with number 40, Grilka. Let's see it.
Oh, you gotta let it be dramatic, Keith.
Oh, wow. You made it so dramatic. Look at that. All right. Well, here it is. Grilka is a character from Deep Space Nine, from the episode The House of Quark. Obviously a Klingon heiress, and Quark ends up killing the leader of the house, and in order for her to retain power, she has to make Quark the head of the house and marry Quark. It's a fun episode. She shows up again later. It's a fun episode, and obviously the Klingon figures are super fun. What do you think, Mike?
I love the way we always get a nice boob window in a Klingon figure, so I'm sure that would be no exception here.
Grilka does not. That's just Lursa and B'Etor.
Oh, okay, great. Well, then good.
They had a flair for the dramatic. So there we go. All right, so let us continue with number 39. I'm going to wait for the... Ooh, God, those graphics are... You've made them so dramatic. There it is. Adult Alexander from Deep Space Nine. Now, of course, everybody knows Alexander from The Next Generation as a little boy, played by about 15 different actors. But he also shows up in Deep Space Nine, played by Mark Warden. And I should point out that Grilka is played by Mary Kay Adams. Sorry. So he shows up and continues being annoying, but certainly the father-son dynamic, and Worf as a kind of a shitty father, but it makes for an interesting story. So while we're getting some Klingons, give us some adult Alexander. Next up, speaking of parental roles, let's go to figure number 38. It's Moogie.
Hey, that's cool.
Quark and Rom's mother. Also, sometimes welcome, sometimes annoying, but certainly an interesting character, played by two different amazing actresses. The first of them was Andrea Martin, Broadway's Andrea Martin, and then Cecily Adams. But ended up being a pretty interesting character with a lot of arc in our Ferengi stories. So I would prefer the clothed Moogie because, Mike, I don't know if you know, but Ferengi women are not supposed to wear clothes. It is scandalous when they wear clothes.
Yeah, well, the nudie Moogie.
But Moogie is a progressive feminist who wears clothes and tries to make profit herself. And so that part of the story actually becomes interesting and relevant. So
you're saying she's the Gloria Steinem of Ferengis?
She is the Gloria Steinem of Ferengis. That's right. And Quark and Rom's mom. Let's go to number 37. Who is it? It's Ensign Wildman from Star Trek Voyager, who was a character who showed up here and then, but she was mostly interesting because guess what? Voyager gets beamed, 80 years away into a different quadrant, and she's pregno. And what do you do there? Because this is Voyager was not a ship designed to have children on board, and sadly, her husband was on the other side of the quadrant, and so that brought up a lot of interesting storytelling. And why don't we just continue with no further ado, because she's pregnant with somebody, right? Let's find out who with number 36, Naomi Wildman, who grew supernaturally fast because the series is only 7 episodes long, and then that girl is much older than 7. But that is Ensign Wildman was played by Nancy Hauer. Naomi Wildman, her daughter, is played by Scarlett Palmers, who was an interesting character and actually gave us a different window into their adventures by having the eyes of a child there, and had a great relationship with Neelix. And I thought it was an interesting color. I thought it was smart to have to add a kid to the show, and the plan, because it was gonna take them 80 years to get back. It had to be a generational ship.
Yeah.
And so they needed to start having kids. If it was going to take that long, in 30 or 40 years, they wouldn't have anybody to run the ship.
Do they ever do any flash forward episodes?
They do in various timelines, and I see, 'cause it's so funny to do the show. Mike hasn't seen it, so he doesn't know what happens. But yeah, there are a couple of episodes that address the possibility of that, which I find really interesting. Also, what's interesting, let us go to number 35. It's a twin pack. You're getting 2 for 1 here.
Ooh.
Because we're getting Kor and Koloth from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Now, this is an interesting situation here because there was a terrific episode of Deep Space Nine where they had the three main Klingons from the original series, Kor, Koloth, and Kang, come back on Deep Space Nine as old friends of Dax. And so we see Kor and Koloth here in their on Deep Space Nine and in their original appearances on the original series. And so we talked about it before. The Klingons didn't have their head ridges or their hair or whatever. They were just painted a little weird. And so obviously when they show up in our contemporary times, they are now full Klingons. We don't really talk about it, but played by the same actors and made a really interesting story. And Playmates made a figure of Kang, but not of Kor and Koloth. And it's a little bit weird, especially because like Kor was the most interesting of the three. Also, so these are played by John Colicos and William Campbell. Now, William Campbell, you say, I feel like I've heard that name before. You have, and you've seen his figure because he also played Trelane, the Q-ish character on the original series. So he played two different characters on the original series and then showed up 30 some odd years later on Deep Space Nine. So that's fun. A lot of Klingons in this first 10. Coming up next is Michael Eddington, played by Kenneth Marshall on Deep Space Nine. Now, I'm not going to give away his storyline to Mike because he doesn't know yet. But he comes in as a Starfleet security officer and has an interesting arc as it goes through. And certainly deserves a figure with all of his showdowns with various folk who I won't talk about, spoiler alert, from 1999. But we definitely need a Michael Eddington figure. You know who else we need? Let us go forward to number 33. An interesting little piece of Star Trek trivia. We need Ensign Vorik from Star Trek Voyager, of course, played by Alexander Enberg. So he's obviously a Vulcan, and this screenshot is from his. Every Vulcan has to have a bout of Ponfar at some point. I mean, duh. And so he deals with his Ponfar in this episode, and shows up a couple of things. It's again, the Voyager creating obstacles, right? So the story of Ponfar for Mike here is, every 7 years, Vulcans have to mate. They only do it every 7 years, but if they don't do it, they die. They go crazy and they die. And here's the problem: when you're on Voyager, he's the only Vulcan, so he has nobody to mate with. And how do you solve that problem? Well, he's not the only Vulcan, but he's the only. There is no female Vulcan, and Vorik likes the ladies. So, what are you gonna do? Now, an interesting thing about Alexander Enberg, there is a fantastic episode of The Next Generation called Lower Decks, which you'll recognize that title because they basically took that episode's premise and turned it into the animated comedy series Lower Decks.
Okay.
And so he is also in that episode playing a Vulcan who looks exactly the same, named Torik, not Vorik. And so I'm assuming they didn't use the same character because they didn't want to be giving character payments to the author for the writer of Lower Decks, which is something that Voyager did a fair amount, Tom Paris. But anyway, it's interesting that they had the exact same actor in the exact same character, just mildly changed the name. It's too bad because it was a good character. I think it would have given something, and he didn't show up in that many episodes. I think it would have added an extra element if he came from the Enterprise. Let us move forward. There's only 2 left in this series. To number 32, it's crewman Kellen from Deep Space Nine, specifically the episode The Siege of AR-558, and of course played by legendary sci-fi actor, no, not Saul Rubinek, Bill Mummy. So a lot of people requested this character because of his other sci-fi work. Really interesting episode of Deep Space Nine. It's where stuff gets dark. Later in the series, they're in a full-blown war that is, it's rough, it's tough, it's a battle and hand-to-hand combat. And this siege episode, we sort of deal with, we set up a whole PTSD line for Nog. And it's dark, and it's upsetting, and it's sad, and it's just great TV. So I think this episode deserves to be represented in a figure of Crewman Kellen. All right, this one's fun. It's number 31. It's a fake Romulan from the Deep Space Nine episode In the Pale Moonlight. So the Romulan, technically, it's not actually credited as it's a fake Romulan from all the memes. It's actually Senator Vreenak, played by Stephen McHattie. But also from the episode In the Pale Moonlight of Deep Space Nine, which is, I think, arguably the very best episode of Deep Space Nine. It is also the darkest episode of Deep Space Nine. It is the least Star Trek because it's grim and people have to make some choices, some non-Star Trek choices in this episode. But this is sort of an iconic moment from that episode, and a lot of people have made memes out of this particular line reading, and certainly deserves a figure. Okay, folks. Well, that is number 40 to 31 of the more wish list, Playmates wish list. So the second 40 that we're doing, I've numbered this in a confusing way. I apologize, but you know what? I'm just going to commit to it. That's what we're going to do. And we will be back with another video for the next 10 of our wish list. Mike, tell them how to communicate with us.
Well, team, you can go ahead and send us an email at lookatmystartrektoys@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at Star Trek Toys, or you can like and subscribe and comment here on the YouTube down below. For myself, Mike Indeglia, who's along for the ride, and our Captain Keith T. Varney.
No.
Yeah, figure it out.
Tiberius,
I should know his
Varney,
middle name
whatever.
and do not, but that's the way we're going to go. We're going to see you for 30 through 21 real shortly on
Look at my Star Trek toys!